University, and I'm a junior English major. This started as a paper for Dr. John Jones in English department, and I'm just going to kind of let my intro be handled by the slideshow here. Alright, and as I said, my paper is called Search Your Feelings, Wordsworthian Spirituality and Star Wars. And before I get too much into, before I talk too much, I have another clip that I'm going to use to start my discussion. Oh, maybe I don't. Okay. So that didn't work out so well. But I'll tell you what the clip was. It's the famous Luke, I'm your father scene. And in that scene, Darth Vader tells Luke after he reveals, it's not shocking anymore. We all know what happens. But at the time, that was like a really shocking revelation. And he tells him to know the surety of the truth of this. All you have to do is search your feelings. And so I thought, what does this mean? Why do they search their feelings? That tells me that Jedi and Sith alike, anyone who is force sensitive, looks to themselves, their inner feelings, rather than any sort of external authority to sort of learn the absolute truth. And in that way, they're very similar to the Romantic poets. And this is when the slide was supposed to come up. This is William Wordsworth. He's kind of the father of Romanticism. It's not quite so simple as that, but I'm going to simplify it for purposes of time. And as you can see, he has very many feelings. So, if you don't know what Romanticism is, then I feel it necessary to kind of go into its background a little bit. But to understand Romanticism, we need to go back in time to the Age of Enlightenment. Okay. So, if you could characterize the Age of Enlightenment in one word, it would probably be rational. This is when rationalism was kind of the dominating philosophy, and the poetry shared. That kind of bled over into the poetry from the era, and Wordsworth couldn't stand this. He thought the poetry was just excessively rational. It took a form over content approach that he thought was sort of, cramming the poetry into kind of an artificial shell instead of letting it be more organic. And it had superfluous, artificial poetic diction. So he had some really different ideas about what poetry should be. Oh, and this is Alexander Pope. He's kind of the poster boy for Enlightenment poetry. He wrote The Rape of the Lock, which you might have read in some English classes. Okay, so now we're getting into Wordsworth's poetic ideal. He set a lot of these ideas forth in the 1800 preface to lyrical ballads, in which he says, "Low and rustic life was really chosen as subject matter because in that situation, the essential passions of the heart find a better soil in which they can attain their maturity, are less under restraint, and speak a plainer and more emphatic language." These essential passions they're the definition of poetry for Wordsworth. He thinks that the trappings of the urbane, upper-class social life get in the way of authentic expression, which is that's all poetry is to him. And also from the preface, his definition of poetry, for all good poetry, is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. Furthermore, his definition of a poet is a man who, being possessed of more than usual organic sensibility, has also thought long and deeply on his feelings. And this is actually in accord with his own method of composing poetry. He would, go out and frolic in the daisies or something, and then he would go home, sit in his big armchair, and kind of meditate on the daisies for a while, and then he would write his poem. So a lot of these kind of hallmark romanticist ideas that he set forth are kind of embodied in this passage from Tintern Abbey. And I felt the presence that this disturbs me with the joy of elevated thoughts, a sense sublime of something far more deeply infused, a motion and a spirit that impels all thinking things, all objects of all thought, and rolls through all things. Now, you might see where I'm going with this passage, but if you don't, we'll get to it in just a few minutes. So kind of the first point that I want to make is that a poet of Wordsworth's description is basically a Jedi. So they're both highly attuned to the environment. Poets can use nature's influence and channel it into highly expressive language. And kind of by the same token, Jedi tap into the Force and they flip around and levitate stuff. So that might be a little bit cooler than poetry, but it's the same idea. And then nature inspires Wordsworth with elevated thoughts, and Jedi and Sith use the Force to gain knowledge and power. Okay, and through this presence in nature from that passage, Wordsworth has produced poetry that has outlasted his physical, earthly presence. And then Force-sensitive people also use the Force to surpass normal limits of mortality. Right, and in addition to Wordsworth's own similarity to a Jedi, the concepts of this presence in Tintern Abbey and the Force are also very similar. Okay, so kind of at the core of Tintern Abbey is this interplay of the material and the spiritual. And that's the core of that poem, and that's also what's going on with the Force. So if we'll look at this passage again, I've highlighted some of these words that are kind of my focal points. You have a presence, deeply infused, emotion, a spirit that impels all thinking things, drives them forward and rolls through all things. And now I want to compare some descriptions of the Force. It's an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us, it penetrates us, and it binds the galaxy together. And then Yoda, life creates it, it makes it grow. Its energy surrounds us and binds us. Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter. Another aspect of similarity in this presence and the Force are in the idea, as one critic says, that there's kind of a spiritual amphibiousness of mankind. So Wordsworth believes he owes to nature's forms of beauty a serene and blessed mood wherein he is laid asleep in body and becomes a living soul and sees into the life of things. This sounds almost like the concept of astral projection to me, and I think this is very similar to when characters are very strong in the Force. They don't really they don't die a normal death. They kind of dissipate into the air and they become a Force ghost like Yoda or Obi-Wan or Darth Vader. And a third aspect of similarity between the presence and the Force are in kind of the moral implications and overtones that they carry. Wordsworth calls nature the soul of all my moral being, and the Force, obviously with the light side and the dark, has some very kind of heavy-handed moral implications. So the shared characteristics of the light side of the Force and this presence are the pursuit of knowledge, the practicing of patience and passiveness, and then the dark side, which does not necessarily, in my opinion, find a counterpart in the presence. It's kind of the absence of the presence. It's like unbridled passion without discipline. It's kind of the broad and easy way. It doesn't require any tempering of emotion with thought. Okay, and in this way I see the Force as kind of a metaphor for creative inspiration. You have the Wordsworthian way, that's kind of this fresh, organic, controlled way, and then the dark side, which is kind of the path that Darth Vader took. He was completely overcome with passion and eventually became kind of twisted and artificial, going back to kind of that Enlightenment ideal and the similarity there. All right, and then this last aspect of similarity between the two are in connections to religion. So Star Wars has caught a lot of comparisons to a lot of world religions. It incorporates a lot of elements from different places. And one of the most notable ones is Buddhism. There are the similarities of the Jedi and Buddhists both practicing sitting meditation. They both try to overcome attachment. They practice compassion. And then the way that Jedi dress is also like kind of vaguely Asian. So the question that arises is, why does Lucas include these elements of world religions in Star Wars? Is he a Buddhist? Is this like an advertisement? When Lucas was asked this question at a really interesting film interview by Bill Moyers, I think it was, Star Wars isn't an ad for Buddhism or any other religion. This is the answer he gives. He instead wants viewers to ask the big questions. What's beyond this material reality that we see right in front of us? And Wordsworth in Tintern Abbey is kind of negotiating this same area. He's asking and trying to answer these same questions. And in this way, I think that these two, though they don't have a lot in common on the surface, have a really similar shared artistic vision. They both produce these landmark works of art that have revolutionized their respective creative spheres, and they both have this conviction that something in nature or in the world, whether it's a prince or kind of binds the universe together. And I think they're both asking us to search our own feelings and look for the truth.